Hi, I'm Kaylee, and today I'm talking about 100 classics that I've read. So I just had the idea to kind of sit down and scroll through my Goodreads and talk about some classics. These are not in any particular order. These are just some of my favorite classics that I've read, and yes, here we go. If you haven't already, please do subscribe and give this video a thumbs up if you love classics. So I've got my computer here with my Goodreads pulled up, and we're just gonna go through and see some classics. Let's do it. So first one is Shirley by Charlotte Bronte, because that's the one that I read most recently. I love Shirley because it has these just fierce personalities in the characters. Then we have Jane Austen's Mansfield Park. I didn't always used to love Mansfield Park, but I came to appreciate Fanny's strong but quiet personality. We have The Odd Women by George Gissing. This one has a really interesting look at choosing to be single or choosing to be married and kind of what that choice means to each person. Under the Lilacs by Louisa May Alcott is one of my all-time favorites. It's about a young man who runs away from the circus and finds a new family. It's adorable and wholesome. I love it. Anne of Green Gables by Ellen Montgomery is, of course, a forever favorite because Anne is such a sweet and imaginative character. I love how her imagination just sweeps her away. Agnes Grey by Anne Bronte is all about this poor governess who kind of just has to find a life for herself away from her employers. It's a quiet but powerful book. The Moorland Cottage by Elizabeth Gaskell has a poor woman who kind of has to decide, is she going to choose her family or is she going to stick by her awful, abusive family? Percival Keene by Frederick Marryat is one of my favorite seagoing adventures. Lots of pirates and shipwreck and all that good stuff. Jack and Jill by Louisa May Alcott is about a little girl who is an invalid and she's struggling with her health, but a lot of her friends come in to help her and encourage her. It's another just really sweet, really cute story. The Small House at Allington by Anthony Trollope is, I think, the fourth book, or maybe the fifth book, I'm not even sure anymore, in the Barsetshire Chronicles. This is such a beautiful story and so wonderfully well told. It's very emotional, but it did not end the way I wanted it to. So I kind of have a love-hate relationship with this one. Framley Parsonage is another one in the Barsetshire Chronicles by Anthony Trollope. This one I really like because it follows a clergyman and he's kind of having some moral dilemmas. So it's really interesting to see how he kind of works through things through the story. Far from the Madding Crowd is my favorite book by Thomas Hardy because it's one of the few that actually has a happy ending. This is another one where I really love the just larger than life, fierce personalities. Basil by Wilkie Collins is about a man who trusts the wrong people and ends up in a mistaken marriage, and he has to figure his way out of that predicament. Henry VIII is one of my favorite plays by William Shakespeare. It just has such robust characters and just, oh man, really good speeches. Richard III is another good one from William Shakespeare, just with, I don't know what it is, the humor and the just kind of inspiring speeches and just that rich language. Something about those plays are so good. Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. I like that this one isn't as horrifying as people think. Like, it's not really that scary. It's more thoughtful and introspective and philosophical. The Wrong Box by Robert Louis Stevenson is hilarious. It's about a corpse that goes missing and with hilarious results, and it's just so irreverent and funny. Cecilia by Fanny Burney is about an heiress who's trying to decide, do people love her for herself or is it just for her money? Little Women by Louisa May Alcott is, of course, fantastic and delightful and always a favorite. Little Dorrit by Charles Dickens is about this sweet little girl and her father is in debtor's prison. I really like that this one has such vivid personalities, like all of Dickens, of course. Another Dickens that I love is Martin Chuzzlewit. This one has the best character development that I have ever seen in any book ever. I mean, there's a character in here that just makes a complete 180, and I love it. Another awesome seafaring adventure by Frederick Marryat is Peter Simple. This is another one that is just full of adventure and fun. Another favorite Dickens is Our Mutual Friend, where a guy comes back from the dead to claim his inheritance. It's so hard to put Dickens into like a one-sentence synopsis because you can't do that with Dickens. All of his plots are so complex and intricate. The Secret Garden by Frances Hodgson Burnett is one that I reread over and over and over, and I never get tired of it. Lorna Doone by R.D. Blackmore is full of battles and duels. It's a rip-roaring tale of chivalry and love. The Blue Castle by Ellen Montgomery is one of my favorite of her standalone books. It's just a sweet and really imaginative romance. I love it. The Aunt Jane's Nieces series. The Children of the New Forest by Frederick Marryat is about these children who've been orphaned and they have to learn to survive off the land. The White Company by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle is an old-fashioned story about knights in shining armor, and they have to fight for the honor of their lord, and they have jousting and battles and all kind of fun stuff. Prisoner of Zenda by Anthony Hope is a case of mistaken identity when someone takes the identity of the Prince of the Land. Ben-Hur by Lew Wallace, of course, has that famous chariot race that I love. Probably one of my favorite Shakespearean plays is Henry V. It just has so many interesting characters and inspiring speeches, and oh, it's just so wonderful. I think this is the one that has the famous St. Crispin's Day speech. And oh, that one gets me every time. Another book by Anthony Trollope, probably one of my favorites, is Dr. Thorne. Dr. Thorne adopts an orphan, and then that orphan has to kind of find their place in society. My Cousin Rachel by Daphne du Maurier is chilling and mysterious and wonderful. Another Shakespeare that I really like is Julius Caesar. It's just, I don't know, it's, what's the word? It's kind of creepy and intriguing and mysterious. Eight Cousins and Rose and Boom by Louisa May Alcott are some of my favorites. Rose grows up surrounded by her 8 cousins who are all boys. So she kind of has to be a calming, good influence on them because they are all so rambunctious. Measure for Measure is a really fun, just hilarious comedy from Shakespeare. Always just silly and ridiculous and fun. I'm just going to include all of the Sherlock Holmes books together. All of these are fantastic and mysterious and interesting and intricate, and I love them. As You Like It is another famously funny Shakespearean play. Another one that's just silly and ridiculous, and you're like, what? What are they doing? This is crazy. But you kind of just go with it, you know, and it's fun. The Moonstone by Wilkie Collins is one of my favorite mysteries, and it's one of the first mysteries ever written that had a detective as one of the main characters. No Name is another favorite by Wilkie Collins about these 2 sisters who have lost their inheritance because they were illegitimate children and they're trying to get their inheritance back. Of course, The Wind in the Willows by Kenneth Grahame is one of my very favorite classics. I just reread it all the time and I completely love it. Dombey and Son is a forever favorite about Mr. Dombey who loves his son much more than he loves his daughter. Dombey and Son contains one of my favorite heroes in all of Dickens. The Black Dwarf by Sir Walter Scott is kind of a weird and creepy and strange tale. I'm actually currently rereading the Emily trilogy by Lucy Maud Montgomery. Emily is a little girl who dreams of being a writer. But of course there are obstacles in her way. Hans Brinker or The Silver Skates by Mary Mapes Dodge was one of my favorites when I was a kid. It's still a favorite. I just love the beautiful look at the Netherlands and the Dutch culture at that time, and the sweet story, and it's just lovely. Antony and Cleopatra is another one by William Shakespeare that, I don't know, is sort of strange and wild and creepy, but really enjoyable, really interesting, really captures your attention. It's just kind of fascinating. Mary Barton by Elizabeth Gaskell is such an interesting book, just so engaging. It really tugs at your heartstrings. Daniel Deronda by George Eliot is about a young man who is striving to find his heritage and his identity. Pilgrim's Progress by John Bunyan is an allegory about the Christian journey. The Portable Milton has all my favorite poems from John Milton, Paradise Lost, and Comus. The Cloister and the Hearth by Charles Reade is about a man who has to choose between his spiritual life and just having an ordinary life. The Story Girl is another favorite from Lucy Maud Montgomery, just adorable and wholesome and sweet. The Adventures of Tom Sawyer from Mark Twain. And of course, The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. Both of these are really funny and adventurous and a complete delight. I like Robinson Crusoe by Daniel Defoe because it has such details about how he survives on the island, and it's sort of like a practical book, very practical. 2 Years Before the Mast by Richard Henry Dana. This is a true story about seagoing adventures. King Solomon's Mines by H. Rider Haggard. This one is pure adventure from start to finish. The Scarlet Letter by Nathaniel Hawthorne is not necessarily an enjoyable read, but it explores so many different deep emotions and philosophical ideas and spiritual and religion and all kind of different things. So it is an interesting read. A Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court by Mark Twain is just crazy and wild and hilarious and just this insane reimagining of what King Arthur's Court could have been like. Wives and Daughters is a forever favorite about a young lady who gets a new stepmother and stepsister and how their family changes. Villette by Charlotte Bronte is about a young woman who becomes a teacher at a school and falls in love with one of the professors there. Ruth by Elizabeth Gaskell is about a young woman who gets into some trouble and is shunned by society. David Copperfield by Charles Dickens is my favorite Dickens, and it's a story about a young man who is growing up. A Tale of Two Cities is another favorite, all about some people who are just trying to survive through the French Revolution. Goodbye, Mr. Chips is about a teacher who kind of doesn't really connect with his students, but through the years then he learns his true purpose in teaching. The Old Curiosity Shop is about a young girl and her grandfather who are thrown out to the mercies of the world. Persuasion by Jane Austen is about two young people who are trying to decide if they can have a second chance at love. The Pickwick Papers is just hilarious. From start to finish, it is just really ridiculous and silly. Oliver Twist is of course about an orphan who is forced to work as a thief. Jane Austen's Northanger Abbey is about a young girl who is really too imaginative, and she imagines ghosts and conspiracies around every corner. Raffles, the amateur cracksman, is kind of the counterpoint to Sherlock Holmes, where instead of solving mysteries, Raffles is a gentleman thief. Emma by Jane Austen is one of my favorites, about a girl who decides that she's going to try her hand at matchmaking. Another Jane Austen that I love is Sense and Sensibility, about one sister who is really sensible and another sister who is way too sensitive. Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte, of course, is one of my absolute favorites of all time, about a governess who has to make a life for herself and is kind of drawn into some dark secrets of her employers. Tom Brown's School Days by Thomas Hughes is just what it sounds like, all about Tom Brown at school. The next one is Pride and Prejudice. This is about 5 sisters who are all hunting for a husband. The Jungle Book by Rudyard Kipling, one of my favorite stories, and it doesn't just have stories about Mowgli, it has other stories as well. Vanity Fair by William Thackeray. This one is kind of a commentary on how society is just full of vanity. Black Beauty by Anna Sewell was one of my favorites when I was a teenager and I was going through my phase of loving horses. The Three Musketeers by Alexandre Dumas is full of chivalry and honor and spies and intrigue. The Scarlet Pimpernel by Baroness Emuska Orczy is all about spies in the French Revolution. The Merry Adventures of Robin Hood by Howard Pyle is of course a favorite. The Mysteries of Udolpho by Anne Radcliffe is full of gothic mystery and romance. Waverley by Sir Walter Scott is probably my favorite of Sir Walter Scott. It's just full of dashing heroes and strong heroines. I love it. And Ivanhoe by Sir Walter Scott is full of knights in shining armor and fainting maidens. Romeo and Juliet by William Shakespeare is a favorite just because of the flowery language. Midsummer Night's Dream is another one that's a favorite just because, oh, just the beautiful poetry and the magic, moonlight and fairy dust. But Much Ado About Nothing is my very favorite play by William Shakespeare because Beatrice and Benedick have such witty dialogue. They are just so fun. Pygmalion by George Bernard Shaw is one of my favorite plays. Mainly I just love My Fair Lady. Mainly I just love the musical. The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexandre Dumas is all about a man who was wrongfully imprisoned, and when he escapes, then he gets revenge. Around the World in 80 Days is one of my favorites from Jules Verne because it's just so interesting to see all these different cultures all around the world and all the adventures they have. Middlemarch by George Eliot is a really deeply philosophical and thoughtful book about a woman who gets married and then she thinks maybe she made a mistake. Rob Roy is another favorite adventure from Sir Walter Scott. I always love his books that are set in the Scottish Highlands. North and South by Elizabeth Gaskell is one of my favorite books ever. It's all about a young woman who goes to live in a different part of England, and the culture and just the society is so different that she has trouble fitting in. 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea by Jules Verne is a crazy, imaginative, wild adventure with Captain Nemo and his submarine under the sea. The Prince and the Pauper by Mark Twain is about two boys who are identical and they switch places for the day. Another favorite from Charles Dickens is Bleak House. This is about a man who kind of takes these orphans under his wing while they're waiting for their inheritance to come in. The Woman in White by Wilkie Collins is this strange and desperate tale about a girl who seems to have lost her mind. Thelma by Marie Corelli is about a young man who goes vacationing in the north and he falls in love. Swiss Family Robinson is about a family from Switzerland who are cast away on a desert island. Captains Courageous by Rudyard Kipling is about a young man who falls overboard from a ship and is rescued by some fishermen. Treasure Island by Robert Louis Stevenson is about pirates seeking for a treasure. The Tenant of Wildfell Hall by Anne Bronte is about a woman who is running from her past and she moves into a new neighborhood and she's kind of mysterious. They're not sure what she's all about. Kim by Rudyard Kipling is about a young boy growing up in India and he gets involved in a plot with some spies. The Mill on the Floss by George Eliot is about a brother and sister and kind of their rocky relationship and how they finally learn to accept one another and love their own family. Okay, I think that was 100. I might have miscounted, but I think that was 100 classics. Please leave me a comment down below and let me know what are some of your favorite classics. And have you read any of these same ones that I have on my list here? These are by far not all of the classics that I have read. These are just some of my favorites that I wanted to talk about. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe and remember, the right book in the right hands at the right time can change the world.